The golden sunset painted the Mumbai skyline in warm hues as Arjun Mehta stood at his penthouse window, an untouched cup of chai growing cold in his hands. At 35, he had everything money could buy: the top floor of the city's most exclusive building, a fleet of luxury cars, and a tech company worth billions. But as another evening settled over the bustling city, the emptiness of his massive home seemed to echo with every step he took. 20 years ago, he had been just another middle-class boy with big dreams, coding on a second-hand laptop in his family's modest two-room flat. Now, his company, NextGen Solutions, was revolutionizing the tech industry. But success had come with a price that no amount of money could fix. "Mr. Mehta," his assistant's voice came through the intercom, "the doctor's office called with your latest test results." Arjun's grip tightened on the chai cup. He had visited the best fertility specialists across the world: Singapore, London, New York, Mumbai. Each time the verdict was the same. The words "extremely low probability of conception" haunted him like a shadow he couldn't shake. He walked through his home, past empty rooms decorated by the city's top interior designers. The space that should have been a nursery remained locked, a dream deferred. Family photos lined one wall: his parents at his company's launch, his sister with her 3 kids at their summer home in Lonavala, his cousin's newborn baby shower last month. Each image was a reminder of what he couldn't have. His phone buzzed. Another message from his mother. "Beta, met the sweetest girl today at the temple. Her family is very well educated." Arjun sighed. His mother meant well, but how could he marry someone without telling them the truth? And once he did, who would want to build a future with him? In Indian society, where family meant everything, his condition felt like an insurmountable wall between him and happiness. The next morning, during the board meeting, Rajesh Uncle, his father's oldest friend and senior board member, cleared his throat. "Arjun, about the new educational software division." Arjun looked up from his laptop. The company was expanding into educational technology, creating learning platforms for underprivileged schools. It was his passion project, a way to give back to society. "The market research shows," Rajesh Uncle continued, adjusting his glasses, "parents connect better with family-oriented leadership. Your bachelor status, it might not project the right image." The words stung more than they should have. Arjun maintained his composed exterior, years of business negotiations coming in handy. "The quality of our products will speak for itself," he replied firmly. But later that night, as he sat in his home office overlooking the glittering city lights, the words wouldn't leave him. On his desk sat a photo of him with a group of children from the orphanage his company supported. The joy in their faces, their innocent dreams, it was everything he wanted in his own home. His childhood friend Raj had dropped by earlier, showing videos of his daughter's first steps. "You should see how she runs the house now," Raj had laughed. "Even my CEO authority means nothing in front of her demands for bedtime stories." Arjun scrolled through his phone, looking at messages from family and friends. Each one seemed to revolve around children, school admissions, birthday parties, vacation plans with kids. His cousin's wife had just announced their second baby. His sister kept asking when her children would get cousins to play with. He walked to his home gym, hoping to tire himself out enough to sleep. The magazine rack caught his eye. A business journal with his face on the cover. "India's most eligible bachelor. The billionaire everyone wants to know." The irony made him laugh bitterly. What would they write if they knew the truth? His father had always said, "Beta, money is not wealth. Real wealth is the happiness you create for others." Growing up in their modest home, they might not have had luxury, but there had been so much laughter, so much love. Now, despite all his success, his home felt like a museum, beautiful but lifeless. That night, as he lay in his king-size bed, Arjun made a decision. He couldn't change his medical reality, but perhaps he could change how he faced it. The educational software division wasn't just about business, it was about touching lives, creating futures. Maybe it was time to focus on that, to find meaning beyond traditional expectations. He opened his laptop and began typing. Ideas flowed for the new project: interactive learning modules, scholarship programs, teacher training initiatives. Hours passed as he worked, his enthusiasm growing with each line of the proposal. As dawn broke over Mumbai, painting the sky in shades of hope, Arjun felt something shift inside him. He might not be able to have children of his own, but he could still make a difference in countless young lives. Little did he know, as he finally drifted off to sleep, that life was about to surprise him in ways he never imagined. Sometimes the greatest miracles happen when you stop waiting for them and start living for something bigger than yourself. And in the bustling city of Mumbai, where millions of stories intertwined every day, his story was about to take an unexpected turn that would change everything he thought he knew about love, family, and what it truly means to be complete. Rain poured over Mumbai's busy streets as Priya Sharma rushed through the entrance of Hotel Grand Imperial, her dupatta slightly damp despite her best efforts with the umbrella. She was already 10 minutes late for her evening shift, and Sharma Sir, the restaurant manager, had been extra strict lately about punctuality. The staff entrance was busy with workers hurrying to their posts. Priya quickly changed into her uniform, smoothing her hair back into a neat bun. The pristine white apron felt stiff. She'd stayed up late last night starching it perfectly. In a place where meals cost more than her weekly salary, appearance mattered. Priya Diddy, your table assignments changed, Ritu, another waitress, called out as Priya headed to her usual section. You've got the private dining area tonight. The big boss from some tech company is hosting a business dinner. Priya's heart sank. The private dining area meant higher profile guests, bigger tips potentially, but also more pressure. One small mistake could cost her the job she desperately needed. With 2 younger siblings depending on her since their parents' accident last year, she couldn't afford any risks. The evening progressed smoothly until it happened. Priya was carrying a tray of mushroom soup to the main table when a guest from another table suddenly pushed his chair back. She tried to steady herself but couldn't prevent the inevitable. The soup went flying, right onto the suit of the man at the head of the table. Time seemed to freeze. The expensive gray suit now wore a map of mushroom soup. Priya's hands trembled as she grabbed napkins. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'm extremely sorry." Her voice shook as she tried to help clean up, knowing this mistake would probably cost her job. But instead of the angry outburst she expected, she heard a gentle chuckle. "Well, I never liked this suit anyway. Too boring for my taste. Mushroom soup definitely makes it more interesting." Priya looked up, meeting kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when they smiled. She recognized him from business magazines. Arjun Mehta, the tech billionaire. Her brother had done a school project about his company just last month. "Sir, please let me pay for the dry cleaning," Priya offered, knowing it would take her entire month's salary but feeling responsible. "Nonsense," Arjun replied, still smiling. "But you could tell me why you looked so worried before the soup incident. You seemed distracted." Something in his genuine tone made Priya honest. "My brother's college admission fee is due next week. I was mentally calculating if my salary advance would cover it." "You're supporting your brother's education. And my sister's. I'm their only family now." Priya bit her lip, wondering why she was sharing personal details with a customer. Before Arjun could respond, Sharma Sir rushed over, profuse apologies spilling from his lips. "Mr. Mehta, I'm so sorry for this incompetence. She will be strictly dealt with." "Actually," Arjun interrupted, "your staff member handled this situation with remarkable grace. In fact, I'd like to speak with her about a potential opportunity at my company's new educational division. We need people who understand the value of education." Priya couldn't believe her ears. Was this really happening? But then she remembered. Opportunities like this always came with a price in her experience. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I don't want charity," she said firmly, her chin lifting slightly. "I can manage my responsibilities." Something flickered in Arjun's eyes, respect perhaps. "This isn't charity, it's business. We're launching educational software for schools like the one your siblings attend. We need input from people who understand ground realities, not just theory. Think about it." He handed her his business card. Despite her initial hesitation, Priya took it. That night, as she rode the local train home to her small flat in Goregaon, she kept touching the card in her pocket. Her siblings were already asleep when she reached home, their books spread across the small dining table. Looking at their peaceful faces, Priya thought about Arjun Mehta's offer. There was something different about him. A sincerity in his eyes when he spoke about education, a kindness in how he handled the soup incident. Still, she'd learned early in life that things that seemed too good to be true usually were. She placed the card on her small dressing table, next to the photo of her parents. "What should I do, Ma?" she whispered to the smiling faces in the frame. The midnight train whistled in the distance, and somewhere in his luxury penthouse, Arjun Mehta was probably thinking about the waitress who'd stood her ground instead of fawning over his wealth. Neither of them knew it yet, but that spilled soup had set in motion events that would change both their lives forever. Sometimes the biggest turning points come disguised as ordinary moments, and destiny works in mysterious ways, even through a bowl of mushroom soup in a fancy hotel restaurant. 3 days after the soup incident, Priya stood outside the gleaming glass building of Next Gen Solutions, clutching her worn leather bag. Her reflection in the mirrored walls showed a simple cotton salwar kameez, the best one she owned, pressed carefully that morning. After much thought and encouragement from her siblings, she had decided to at least hear what Arjun Mehta had to say. The security guard checked her ID and directed her to the express elevator. "Top floor, madam, Mr. Mehta's office." The elevator moved smoothly upward, its glass walls offering a view of Mumbai that made her heart skip. She'd never been this high up before. Her palms were sweaty as she watched the floor numbers climb. When the doors opened, she was surprised to find Arjun Mehta himself waiting, not in a business suit, but in a casual blue kurta and jeans. "Welcome, Priya J. Thank you for coming." His warm smile put her slightly at ease. Instead of leading her to his office, he guided her to a small conference room where a group of children sat around a table, testing what looked like educational software on tablets. "These are students from Maharashtra Municipal School," Arjun explained. "They're helping us understand how to make our educational programs better." He watched the children with genuine interest. "Yesterday, a boy told us our math game was boring." He was absolutely right. Priya observed the children's interactions with the software. One girl raised her hand. "Uncle, this English lesson is too difficult. We don't understand these big words." Arjun nodded seriously, making notes. Priya found herself speaking up. "Maybe if you connected it to their daily lives, like teaching measurements through cooking terms or English through Bollywood songs." The children's eyes lit up at her suggestions. For the next hour, Priya forgot her nervousness as she shared ideas drawn from her experience helping her siblings study. Arjun listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed he truly cared about making education accessible. Finally, he led her to a small garden terrace where a simple lunch was laid out: home-style dal, roti, and sabzi. "I hope you don't mind eating here. It's my favorite spot to think." As they sat down, Arjun came straight to the point. "Priya Ji, I have a proposition for you. But first, I want you to know that your job at the hotel is secure regardless of your answer. I've spoken to the management." Priya felt relief wash over her, but maintained her guard. "What kind of proposition, sir?" "Our company is launching this educational initiative across India. We need someone who understands both education and real-world challenges, someone genuine." He paused. "But we also need to show we understand family values. The board wants me to project a more approachable image." Priya's confusion must have shown on her face because he continued, "I'm proposing a mutual arrangement. Work with us on the educational project. Your insights would be invaluable. In return, appear with me at some public events. Let people see that Next Gen Solutions isn't just about profit." "You want me to pretend to be your—" Priya's voice trailed off, her expression guarded. No. Arjun quickly clarified. "Nothing like that. Just a professional collaboration. You'd be officially hired as an educational program consultant. The public appearances would be part of your job, showing how we work with educators. Complete transparency." He named a salary that made Priya's head spin. It was more than she made in 6 months at the hotel. "Why me?" she asked directly. "Surely there are more qualified people." "Because you stood your ground that night at the hotel. You didn't want charity. You care about education. I saw how you connected with those children just now. That's what this project needs. Heart." Priya thought of her siblings' dreams. With this salary, her brother could attend engineering college. Her sister could take those dance classes she loved. "But I have conditions," she said firmly. "I won't lie or pretend to be something I'm not." And my siblings come first. I need flexible hours for their school meetings. Arjun's face broke into a genuine smile. I wouldn't want you to be anything but yourself. That's the whole point. As for flexibility, family should always come first. They discussed details over lunch. Priya found herself relaxing slightly, impressed by how Arjun ate his simple meal with obvious enjoyment, asking about her siblings' studies with real interest. That evening, as Priya rode the train home, she looked at the contract in her bag. Was she making the right decision? Her mother's voice seemed to whisper in her mind. Beta, sometimes life offers unexpected paths. The question is not whether they're right or wrong, but whether they lead toward your principles or away from them. In his penthouse that same evening, Arjun looked at the children's feedback notes, remembering how Priya's eyes had lit up while suggesting improvements. For the first time in months, the empty rooms didn't feel quite so lonely. Something was changing, though neither of them realized just how much their lives were about to transform. As Mumbai's lights twinkled below, two people from completely different worlds prepared for a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about life, love, and what truly matters in the end. Sometimes the best stories start with a simple yes to an unexpected question. 2 months into their arrangement, Mumbai's afternoon sun streamed through the windows of NextGen's conference room as Priya presented her latest findings on the educational software. Her confidence had grown. She no longer felt out of place in the corporate setting, though she still wore her simple salwar kameez among the formal suits. The students' test scores have improved by 40% since we implemented the local language options, she explained, pointing to the charts. And attendance is up because the children actually enjoy learning now. From his seat at the table, Arjun watched her with growing admiration. Gone was the nervous waitress who'd spilled soup on his suit. In her place stood a passionate educator who'd transformed their entire approach to the project. Later that evening, they found themselves at a small street-side chai stall near one of the municipal schools. It had become their unofficial meeting spot after school visits. The chai wala knew their order by heart: masala chai for Priya, cutting chai for Arjun. You didn't have to defend me in the board meeting, Priya said, blowing on her hot chai. I could have handled their questions about my qualifications. Arjun smiled, remembering how she'd stood her ground against the board's skepticism. I know you could have, but they needed to hear it from me, how you've revolutionized the entire program. Their comfortable silence was interrupted by a small voice. Priya Daddy. A girl from the municipal school ran up, dragging her mother along. Look, Ma, this is the ditty I told you about. She made learning English so much fun. The mother blessed Priya, tears in her eyes. My Pinky never wanted to go to school before. Now she teaches her little brother everything she learns. After they left, Arjun noticed Priya quickly wiping her eyes. These moments, she said softly, they're worth more than any salary. That weekend, Arjun found himself at Priya's small flat in Goregaon, sitting cross-legged on the floor as her brother Rohit explained his engineering project. The tiny living room was cluttered with books and drawings, but it held more warmth than his massive penthouse ever had. Arjun uncle, Priya's sister Roshni called from the kitchen, will you stay for dinner? I'd learned to make pav bhaji. He looked at Priya, who was helping Rohit with his project. She smiled and nodded. These simple family dinners had become his favorite moments, so different from the formal business meetings that once filled his evenings. The next charity gala was nothing like their previous public appearances. When Priya spoke about their educational initiative, her genuine passion moved the audience more than any rehearsed speech could have. Afterward, walking in the venue's garden, Arjun realized something had shifted between them. You're different from anyone I've ever known, he said quietly. You've made me see everything differently. Priya looked at him, moonlight casting shadows on her face. Different how? You showed me that success isn't about board meetings and profit margins. It's about that little girl's smile when she learned something new. It's about Rohit's excitement over his project. It's about, he hesitated, making a real difference in people's lives. A cool breeze carried the scent of Rat Ki Rani flowers. Priya's dupatta fluttered slightly. You always had it in you, Arjun. You just needed to look beyond the corporate walls. Their growing closeness didn't go unnoticed. Office gossip buzzed with speculation, but neither of them paid attention. They were too busy with school visits, software improvements, and evening discussions that stretched from education to their dreams and fears. One evening, stuck in Mumbai's notorious traffic, Priya noticed Arjun looking troubled. "What's wrong?" He sighed. "The board wants me to meet a potential investor's daughter. Marriage talks." Priya's heart skipped a beat, though she kept her voice steady. "Oh, and what do you want?" The traffic light turned red, casting a warm glow over them. Arjun turned to look at her. "I want—" But before he could finish, horns played behind them as the light turned green. That night, in her small room, Priya looked at herself in the mirror. When had things become so complicated? She'd promised herself this was just a professional arrangement. But somewhere between chai meetings and family dinners, between project discussions and quiet conversations, something had changed. In his penthouse, Arjun stood at his usual spot by the window. The city lights blurred as he thought about Priya's question. What did he want? The answer was becoming clearer every day, but it scared him. His medical condition, their different worlds. There were so many reasons to maintain professional boundaries, yet he couldn't deny how his empty home felt warmer after evenings spent with her family. How her practical wisdom had given new purpose to his wealth. How her smile made his heart race like no business success ever had. As Mumbai's night sky sparkled above them, two souls lay awake, each wondering if they dared to dream of something more than their carefully arranged professional relationship. Sometimes the greatest journeys of the heart begin when we least expect them, between cups of roadside chai and simple family dinners, between business meetings and quiet moments of understanding. The monsoon rains pounded Mumbai with unusual force that night. Priya was working late at the next-gen office, finalizing presentations for tomorrow's school visit, when her phone rang. Her neighbor's panicked voice made her blood run cold. "Diddy, come quickly. Roshni collapsed during her dance practice. They've taken her to City Hospital." The world seemed to blur. Priya's trembling fingers could barely gather her things. As she rushed toward the elevator, she ran straight into Arjun, who was returning from a meeting. One look at her face, and he knew something was wrong. What happened? "Roshni, hospital," that's all she could manage. "My car's downstairs. I'm driving you." The usually chaotic Mumbai traffic was worse in the rain. Every red light felt like an eternity. Arjun noticed Priya's hands clasped tightly in her lap, her lips moving in silent prayer. Without thinking, he reached over and squeezed her hand. She held on like it was a lifeline. At the hospital, they found Roshni in the emergency ward, pale and connected to monitors. The doctor's words hit like thunderbolts. Severe pneumonia, complicated by undiagnosed asthma, needed immediate specialized treatment. "The cost?" Priya started to ask, her voice shaking. "Is not your concern," Arjun interrupted firmly. He turned to the doctor. "Give her the best treatment available. I'll handle everything." As they waited outside the ICU, Priya's brother Rohit arrived, drenched from the rain. The three of them huddled together on a hospital bench, an unlikely family united by worry. Hours passed. Arjun made calls, arranging for the city's best pulmonologist. He brought tea and forced Priya to drink it. She hadn't eaten since lunch, but food was the last thing on her mind. Near midnight, during a quieter moment, Priya finally broke down. "I should have noticed something was wrong. She'd been coughing for days, but I was so busy with work." "Stop," Arjun said gently. "You're the best sister anyone could have. Look how you've raised them since your parents. But what if something happens to her? She's all we'd have." Her voice cracked. Arjun pulled her closer, letting her cry into his shoulder. "Nothing will happen to her, I promise." In that sterile hospital corridor, under harsh fluorescent lights, walls began to crumble. Priya spoke about losing her parents, about her fears of failing her siblings. Arjun listened, still holding her hand. Then, surprising himself, he started talking too. About his own medical condition, about the loneliness of his success, about how meeting her had changed everything. "I never told anyone about not being able to have children," he admitted quietly. The great Arjun Mehta, who can buy anything except what he wants most. Priya looked up at him, tears still wet on her cheeks. "You think that makes you less worthy of love?" Their eyes met, years of hidden feelings surfacing in that one look. But before either could speak, the doctor emerged from the ICU. "Your sister is responding well to treatment," he announced. "The next 24 hours are crucial, but I'm optimistic." They were allowed to see her briefly. Roshni lay there, looking small but peaceful, her breathing steadier. Rohit held her hand while Priya stroked her hair. Dawn found them still at the hospital. Arjun had dozed off in the uncomfortable chair, his suit wrinkled, his hands still intertwined with Priya's. She watched him sleep, this billionaire who'd spent the night in a public hospital corridor just to support her family. When Roshni woke up properly the next day, her first words were, "Did I miss my dance practice?" They all laughed through tears. As the day progressed, more people arrived. Priya's colleagues from the municipal school, students from their education program, even the chaiwala from their regular spots sent special ginger tea for Roshni. Looking around the hospital room filled with love and concern, Arjun realized something profound. Family wasn't about blood or biology. It was about who stayed by your side during storms, who held your hand through the darkest nights. That evening, in the hospital's small garden where they'd gone for fresh air, Priya finally found her voice. "About what you said last night, about being worthy of love." Arjun tensed, preparing for rejection. "Love isn't about what you can or cannot give," she continued softly. "It's about who you are. And you, Arjun Mehta, are the most caring, generous, wonderful person I've ever known." The evening breeze carried the scent of rain-washed earth. In that simple hospital garden, surrounded by worried families and hopeful prayers, two souls who'd been afraid to dream found the courage to be honest with each other. As Mumbai's lights began to twinkle in the distance, they sat close together, no longer the billionaire and the teacher, but simply two people who discovered that life's greatest miracles often come disguised as its biggest challenges. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal what's been in our hearts all along. Spring brought new beginnings to Mumbai. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the sky as Arjun and Priya walked hand in hand through Shivaji Park. After Roshni's recovery, they'd stopped pretending their feelings were just professional. Their wedding had been simple but beautiful, a perfect blend of their two worlds. Arjun, Priya squeezed his hand, drawing them to a stop near their favorite breakfast spot. "I need to tell you something." He noticed she looked nervous, the same way she had before her first major presentation. "What is it?" "I've been feeling different lately. At first, I thought it was just wedding stress, but..." She took a deep breath. "I went to the doctor yesterday." Arjun's heart skipped a beat. "Are you okay?" A smile trembled on her lips. "I'm pregnant." The world seemed to stop. Arjun stared at her, unable to process the words. But the doctors said..." "I know." Priya's eyes filled with happy tears. The doctor ran the tests 3 times. She called it unexpected, but... Arjun pulled her into his arms, right there in the middle of the park. Morning walkers smiled at the couple, not knowing they were witnessing a moment that defied medical certainty. Later that day in the doctor's office, they sat holding hands as she explained. While Mr. Mehta's condition made conception highly improbable, it wasn't impossible. Sometimes science can't explain everything. Sometimes miracles happen. The next few months transformed their lives in ways they never expected. Arjun, the businessman who once lived for work, now rushed home early for every doctor's appointment. The empty room in their house that had once haunted him became a nursery, painted in soft yellows and greens. Priya continued working with the educational program, though now she had to take frequent breaks as the baby seemed to do somersaults whenever she tried to give presentations. Her students were delighted, especially the little girls who would pat her growing belly and suggest names. One evening, as they sat in their balcony watching the sunset, Rohit and Roshni came rushing in with excitement. "Didi, look what we found." Roshni held up an old diary. It's Maya's pregnancy diary from when she was expecting me. They spent the evening reading their mother's words, laughing at her descriptions of cravings and mood swings. Priya felt closer to her mother than ever before, understanding now what she had experienced. The news of their miracle pregnancy spread through Mumbai's business circles. Magazines wanted interviews, calling it a real-life fairy tale. But Arjun and Priya kept their privacy, sharing their joy only with close family and friends. Their regular chaiwala insisted on adding extra ginger to Priya's tea. "Good for the baby, Daddy." The municipal school children made cards with their own drawings of baby cradles and tiny shoes. Even the board members who had once questioned Pryor's role now smiled indulgently when she attended meetings with her visible baby bump. One night, Arjun found Pryor in the nursery, arranging tiny clothes. She looked up with tears in her eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked, worried. "Nothing," she smiled. "I was just thinking about that night at the hospital with Roshni. Remember what you said about being worthy of love?" Arjun sat beside her, pulling her close. "I remember everything about that night." "Look at us now," she whispered. "Who would have thought that spilled soup would lead to this?" Their baby kicked, as if agreeing with the sentiment. Arjun placed his hand on her belly, still amazed every time he felt the movement. This miracle had taught him that the best things in life couldn't be planned or purchased, they had to be believed in. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Their home, once a showcase of expensive furniture and modern art, now had toys scattered around, baby books piled high, and tiny clothes hanging to dry. Arjun wouldn't have it any other way. The pregnancy brought its challenges: midnight cravings for pani puri that had Arjun searching through sleeping streets, morning sickness that made board meetings interesting, and emotions that could change faster than Mumbai's weather. But every moment felt precious. Their last ultrasound appointment brought another surprise: twins. As they watched the two tiny heartbeats on the screen, Arjun and Pryor's eyes met in wonder. The doctor smiled. Double the miracle. That evening they gathered in their living room: Arjun, Priya, Rohit, and Roshni. The same family that had huddled together and worried at the hospital now celebrated with mirth and laughter. Roshni had already started choreographing a special dance for the baby's naming ceremony. As night fell over Mumbai, Arjun watched his family, yes, his family, share stories and dreams about the upcoming arrivals. The emptiness that had once echoed through his life was now filled with more love than he had ever imagined possible. Sometimes the greatest miracles come not in the form we expect, but in the way they transform our entire world. For Arjun and Priya, their miracle wasn't just about defying medical odds, it was about finding a love that made everything possible. 1 year had passed since the twins, Aditya and Aradhya, brought their first cries of joy into the world. The penthouse that had once felt too big now seemed to shrink with every passing day as the babies learned to crawl, leaving trails of toys and laughter in their wake. Morning light streamed through the windows as Arjun sat cross-legged on the floor, attempting to feed Aradhya her breakfast, while Aditya crawled enthusiastically toward his favorite toy. These simple moments, messy and chaotic as they were, had become his favorite part of the day. "Looks like someone's winning the battle of breakfast," Priya laughed, entering with a fresh cup of chai. She was dressed for work, but not in the simple stalwart kameez of her teaching days. As the head of NextGen's educational outreach program, she had found a style that balanced professionalism with comfort. "Papa's losing badly." Arjun grinned as Aradhya successfully smeared more porridge on his shirt than in her mouth. His designer suits had long since given way to more practical clothes, especially during morning baby duty. The sound of the doorbell announced Roshni's arrival. Now a college student studying dance therapy, she spent her free mornings helping with the twins. "Where are my little stars?" she called out, and both babies squealed in delight at their Maasi's voice. "Didi, don't forget we have the foundation inauguration today," Roshni reminded Priya while scooping up Aditya, who was making a determined crawl toward the bookshelf. The Meta Sharma Educational Foundation had been their dream project, an initiative that combined Arjun's resources with Priya's vision. Today, they would open their first fully funded school for underprivileged children. Later that morning, as they drove to the inauguration, Arjun glanced at Priya. "Remember the first time we drove together? When you were so nervous about the board meeting?" "And now I make the board nervous," she laughed. Her innovative approaches to education had transformed NextGen's social impact programs, earning recognition across the country. The inauguration was a simple ceremony, just as they wanted. Their old chai wala had set up a special stall, serving his famous masala chai to guests. Students from their pilot programs performed a welcome dance, choreographed by Roshni. Rohit, now an engineering graduate working on educational technology, demonstrated the school's computer lab he had helped design. When it was time for speeches, Arjun kept his brief. "Success isn't measured in profit margins," he said, looking at his family seated in the front row. It's measured in smiles, in dreams achieved, in lives transformed. Priya's speech touched everyone's hearts as she shared their journey from a chance encounter with spilled soup to this moment. Life's greatest miracles, she said, holding back tears, often come disguised as ordinary moments. The children from their first pilot program, now ready for college, presented them with a handmade album. Inside were photos and letters documenting how the educational initiative had changed their lives. One girl, who had once struggled with English, was now heading to medical school. Back home that evening, their living room was full of life. Rohit was showing the twins pictures on his tablet, making them giggle. Roshni was practicing a new dance routine while keeping an eye on the crawling explorers. The aroma of Priya's special biryani filled the air. She still insisted on cooking family dinners, despite their staff's offers to help. Arjun stood at his old spot by the window, but this time the view was different. Instead of empty city lights, he saw his world reflected in the glass. Priya feeding the twins, Roshni and Rohit arguing playfully over the last piece of papad, toys scattered across expensive carpets, and baby clothes hanging to dry on a designer rack. Penny for your thoughts. Priya came up beside him, slipping her hand into his. Just thinking about how empty this view used to feel, he said, pulling her close. Now look at us, we can barely hear ourselves think. As if on cue, Aditya let out a happy shriek as he discovered a new toy, while Aradhya decided it was the perfect moment to practice her newly found voice. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by Roshni's excited voice. Didi, Jiju, look! Aradhya's trying to stand. They rushed to watch as their daughter gripped the sofa, wobbling but determined. The whole family gathered around, cheering her on. When she finally took her first shaky step before plopping down, the celebration was worthy of a festival. Later that night, after the twins were finally asleep and the house had quieted down, Arjun and Priya sat in the nursery, watching their little miracles dream. You know, Arjun whispered, sometimes I still can't believe this is real. That spilled soup changed everything. Priya smiled, remembering that nervous waitress she used to be. Life's best stories aren't the ones we plan, she said softly. They're the ones that surprise us. A cool Mumbai breeze carried the scent of night jasmine through the window. Below, the city lights twinkled as always, but now they seemed to shine with the promise of more miracles to come. In this room, surrounded by love and the soft breathing of their children, two people who had once been worlds apart had found not just each other, but a whole universe of happiness they never knew existed. Sometimes the greatest miracles aren't the ones that defy medical science, but the ones that remind us that love, in all its forms, is the most powerful force of all.